It's it's really great to be here. I appreciate this group. Um, a lot of work and a lot of meetings and go on wrapped around these group of people, Steve and Summer and some other people, and I really do appreciate that. So, I was given this month to do a big book study, and I'll be honest with everybody. I like to do something different every time. Uh, I have to keep myself interested. So what I want to do for the next series of meetings is I want to go through the chapter working with others. Now, the chapter working with others contains everything. It at least contains direction to the person who is helping other people to have experience with all of the steps. So often, big book workshops are about how you can help you. This one will be about how you can help others, and we're gonna just use the chapter working with others in a methodical way for that to happen. So, um, what I want to do is I want to just share a little bit about my personal experience in Alcoholics Anonymous to get us started. Okay, so I have alcoholism. It progressed from who knows when. There's two schools of thought. I think I was pre-alcohol. I think I was alcoholic before alcohol touched me, because I had all this stuff going on, right? But my first drink was somewhere around 1969, 1970, and it was a life-changing experience, that first drink. I don't remember my first Coca-Cola. I don't remember the first time I had sushi. There's a lot of things I don't remember, but I remember that first drink, because something happened within me. Something happened spiritually within me that created a peace, that created a connection, and it created a comfort level in this world for me that I had never experienced before. I didn't have the emotional uncomfortability that went with me everywhere, especially in social situations. That was wiped off of me with that first drink. And from that moment, I made a decision that alcohol was going to play a role in my life moving forward, something that's significant. I'm going to figure out, now I ended up drinking myself into a blackout and coming to in a field. And, there was some bad things about that first drink, right? But what cemented itself into my mind was this was a tool for me to be okay, this alcohol. And I don't know that non-alcoholics ever really have that type of experience. Maybe some of them do, but I had it in a big way. And right out of the gate, the phenomenon of craving was active in my alcoholism at 13 years old, because the two guys I was drinking with, had, I don't know, 3 shots, and they'd had enough. And I did my best to polish off the rest of the bottle of Four Roses whiskey. And here I am, a little 13-year-old, just drunker than Cooter Brown. And it was a mess. And so I came to in a field, and, I had the horrible hangover. But from that moment forward, I became increasingly preoccupied with alcohol. Where was I going to get it? What was I going to drink? Who was I going to drink it with? How am I going to buy it? Because the drinking age was 21 when I started drinking, and I was 13. But we are resourceful, and so it wasn't really that difficult for me to line up booze if I was gonna drink. Now, fast forward through 19 years of drinking, what happened with me, you could plot it on an Excel graph. And what it was over the course of time, I would put more alcohol into my body. Over the course of time, I would get in more trouble. Over the course of time, I would lose more things. Over the course of time, I would get more delusional and not really able to adequately assess, my situation. You know what I mean? And so this progression of alcoholism continued up to a point in time in the late 80s where it had to start getting my attention, right? Like I'd had DUIs, I'd had families leave, I'd lost a ton of jobs, and I got to be honest with you, none of that stuff tapped my brakes. I mean, none of it. I came back from court after a third DUI and had to buy a quart of vodka just to deal with the shame of a third DUI. I mean, none of that stuff tapped my brakes. But what got me toward the end was I was becoming unpredictable. Robert Louis Stevenson wrote a great book, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And if you read that today, that is a beautiful example of an end-stage alcoholic. It really is the story of an end-stage alcoholic because I would put that stuff in my body and I would become Mr. Hyde. I'd have capacity for evil. I'd have capacity for violence. I would have a total disregard for anybody but myself. I was increasingly touchy about shaming me or insulting me or disrespecting me. I became this toxic individual. And as that happened, my world got smaller and smaller and smaller because, you can't be that toxic, and win best in show. You know what I mean? So my world got smaller and smaller and smaller over the course of time. And it ended up being the last 5 years of my drinking I spent in a room in my mother's house. And the second floor was kind of mine, and I was up there drinking myself to death every night and passing out on the floor. And that was my life. But what really got my attention was my capacity to be incredibly violent and mean. Now, I'm not a violent or mean person. I don't believe God made me violent or mean. I believe it's in my instinctual capacity, but that's not my normal mode. And alcohol, the progression of alcohol had me becoming really violent, really mean, and dangerous, right? So what I was worried about, what really got my attention, was an incident at my house in between Christmas and New Year's of 1989, where I threatened my entire family's life. Okay, over Christmas, it wasn't the festive kind of experience that they were looking for, and so they all picked up their Christmas and they went to Oswego, New York, and had it. And I came to and staggered into the kitchen and saw all the vodka bottles, and then I went into a heavy case of the DTs. Where animals are running around the room. There's maggots all over the couch. There's things scratching on the house trying to get in. There's like marching bands out there somewhere. And I went into the DTs. Now, if you've never had the delirium tremens, I'll describe them like this: take terror, take hallucinations, and take convulsions, and jam them all in a blender and push the 10 button. And that's what the DTs are. So for about 2 days, I fish flopped and I freaked out, and I was calling people, trying to, you gotta come home, I'm gonna die. I mean, just flipped out, right? And slowly I started to come out of that. And I came out of that last detox with a firm resolution but more than a firm resolution, a decision. And my decision was, I'm going to go back to AA. I didn't want to go back to AA. I didn't understand AA. I didn't think it was going to work for me anyway. But I made a decision that I was gonna do that, because that's where the non-drinkers were. And God help me, I got to become a non-drinker. So I end up back in Alcoholics Anonymous, and for about 6 months, I'm just staying sober and I'm doing all the fellowship stuff. Listen, in the early 90s, the fellowship was strong in Alcoholics Anonymous, at least in my area, right? I mean, we got together. We would go out to the diner after every meeting and eat a 9 o'clock dinner. You know what I mean? There was sports teams, there was sober volleyball and sober softball, and there's all this stuff that you're supposed to join. There was a whole ton of service commitments. There was treatment centers everywhere in the early 90s. So, we would get these commitments, and we'd go in and share a non-message at like a treatment center. I mean, we were busy, and we dated each other, and we became friends with each other, and we got mad at each other, and we helped each other move, and we buried each other, and we went to everybody's wedding, and we saw everybody in the hospital, and we fellowshipped. You know what I mean? The fellowship was on. And for 6 months, that's what I'm doing. I'm fellowshipping. But there was something inside me. I was still rattled from alcoholism. Now, what did that look like? Well, it looked like on a good day, restless, irritable, and discontent. On a normal day, prey to misery, depression, resentment, anxiety, shame, guilt, remorse, all that emotional and spiritual trauma that you go through, in early recovery. It's all over me, and I'm trying to act halfway sane. How you doing, Chris? Good, sober, got 5 months. You know what I mean? But internally, I'm an absolute basket case. I'm really wondering whether I'm sane. You know what I mean? Because I'm not like all these other people. There's stuff about my case that's different. So what happened was, a buddy of mine had gotten a hold of a set of Joe and Charlie tapes from the mid 80s, right? And he gave them to me, and he told me that he thought I was the kind of guy who, would probably respond well to this particular workshop. And so I listened to it, and first thing it did was infuriated me. My first exposure to it was, what's all this praying? What's all this inventory and making lists of people to, go back and make amends? Listen, I'd heard the steps as they were read off the wall, but you heard that at every meeting. It became redundant. It was like, it was like the announcements before a Daytona 500 race. Nobody listens to them. You know what I mean? Let's get the race on. So I had no real understand. I had no basis in literature or anything like that, right? So what Joe and Charlie started talking about is they start talking about going through the book Alcoholics Anonymous in a methodical way, actually taking the steps as they're outlined in the structure of the book Alcoholics Anonymous, and some of the stuff that you can expect to experience from that. And I'm listening to this, and I'm like, this isn't what's happening in our AA. You know what I mean? Now, please understand me when I say this. I mean no disrespect to that early AA. It was a vital experience of mine, and I had to go through everything to get to where I am today. But if Joe and Charlie were right, everybody in all the AA meetings I went to were wrong, including my sponsor. All right. Now, that is a deep revelation, and I wasn't ready for it. Okay. So I shoved the tapes aside, and I said, maybe that's how they do it in Arkansas, but in New Jersey, we share. More has been revealed. We share. Now what happened between 6 months and a year is I hit what a lot of people would describe as a sober bottom. Some people would describe it as a nervous breakdown. Some people would, there's different ways to describe this, but what it is was I got put into situations that I emotionally could not move through without torturous emotional anxiety and trauma. I lost a girlfriend. A state caught up to me and was coming after me because I fled to avoid prosecution or some stupid thing like that. And a lot of different things happened in a short period of time, and I was rendered incapable of dealage. Has anybody been to a point where they just don't have any dealage? That was me. I didn't have any dealage. And I remember going over to my sponsor's house, and he said something to me like, Chris, do you pray? And I'm like, what the hell is praying gonna do? You know what I mean? I need guns. What praying? So I had listened to these Joe and Charlie tapes, and for one reason or another, I was guided. I believe this is the grace of God. I was guided to put those back in the cassette player in my car and start to listen to them again in a very, very critical way. I got a cassette player, up in my room, and I blew the dust off of the big book they gave me in treatment that I hadn't touched in a year. And I got a notebook and a pen, and I started to go through the steps Joe and Charlie-esque, because there was no other plan. I mean, I didn't know what the hell to do. I knew a relapse was coming, or a mental breakdown was coming. Something was coming. And for one reason or another, I believed that there was an answer in this big book workshop. And what I did was, I went through the steps in a very imperfect way of it. How good can you go through the steps, like listening to tapes, with it, you know what I mean? So it was not anything I would accept from a sponsee today, but it was enough. It was enough for my spirit to start to heal. My spirit started to heal with some of these exercises. Now, fast forward a couple of years. The more of this work that I did, the more recovery work that I did, the more benefit I received from it. So paying attention to that made me more enthusiastic about continuing to practice these principles in all my affairs, to do multiple inventories, to do different fifth steps with different people, to get a bunch of different spiritual books about prayer and meditation, and to start to sponsor like a maniac. And that's what I did. I started to sponsor like a maniac. Half of it wasn't my fault. You start to do this step work and you start sharing in discussion meetings, and your share is just different. People think that you might know what the hell you're doing, whether you do or not, and that was my case. So I started, sometimes the tugboat with the most steam, gets the tow jobs, and I got the tow jobs. A lot of times I got some lunatics. Now, for a while, I was sponsoring in the way I was sponsored. Here's how I was sponsored. My sponsor was a good sponsor for that period of time in that area. He held me accountable to consistent meeting attendance. He was paying attention to that, right? And he was offering suggestions for service commitments. Like cook the food at the treatment center barbecue, or go pick people up at the treatment center and bring them to the meetings. I started to do all the service stuff, and that's what a good sponsor in my area was doing at that period of time. All right. And so I'm starting to sponsor. So I'm kind of doing what he did. Here's my phone number. I want to see you. I go to these meetings. I want to see you at as many of them as possible. When you get a little bit of time, I'm going to want to see you take service commitments. You can start with the coffee commitment, whatever. And so what I was doing was I was encouraging them to participate in two sides of the triangle. One of them was basically fellowship, That's unity. The other was service. It wasn't carrying the message. It was carrying people to the message, or making the message possible to be carried. That's a very important work too. But I was doing all that stuff, and so what that did was that created a sober environment for me to get in touch with these steps. But these sponsees that I was giving my phone number to and suggesting, what meetings to go to, were drinking on me. I don't know if you ever have sponsees drink on you, but it's really not. They make you look bad. You know what I mean? And you just don't want that to happen. So I come up with this idea that I went through the steps Joe and Charlie-esque. So, they took me through the big book page by page by page. I'm going to bring these guys over my house, and I'm going to start taking them through the big book, and I'm going to start to instruct them like Joe and Charlie instructed me on how to take the steps. And maybe they won't drink on me if I do that. I came up with this. It's like 1991. I come up with this idea. Nobody is doing that in my area, right? So it's weird. You want me to come over your house? It was just really weird. Now, I would say back then, I'd say about 1 out of 5 people who I would work with would make it through 4 and 5. They'd make it through 8 and 9, or at least a good way through 9. You know what I mean? And they would start to explore this prayer and meditation stuff. And then they'd kind of start sponsoring other people. And I want to tell you, this is absolutely my experience, and it's absolutely the truth. The people that made it through the steps and then started to take other people through the steps, they're all still around. This is 30 years later. I know where every one of them is. Okay. Now, the people who, come over my house, and after 1 or 2 times over my house, come to the conclusion that they've overreacted by asking Chris to sponsor him. He's got homework and all this weird stuff. They would slither away like a greased weasel, and I don't know where any of them are. Okay, they're part of the Half Measures group. I don't know where any of them are. Maybe they're sober. Maybe they spontaneously recovered. I have no idea. But I do know this, that they're not Alcoholics Anonymous members in good standing anywhere that I'm aware of. So what that taught me was that taught me the value of helping someone go through the 12 steps. Now, this is a meeting that's all about that. There's a million meetings out there that are all about that now. I need to tell you, there were none in 1990. Okay, there were step meetings, there were as Bill sees it meetings, that there was slogan meetings, and there even was an occasional tradition meeting. But there was no how do you go through the steps meetings, and not in our area. I think in Texas and California, maybe some place, Denver, maybe some places like that, there were there were meetings like that, but there weren't any in my area. And so I'm 7 years sober, and a priest comes up to me in a meeting and says, so-and-so who went through the steps with you is someone I know. And I saw I witnessed the change in him, and he attributes it to the step work he did with you. I want you to come to my church, whatever you're doing at your house, forget it. I want you to do it at my church. I'll give you any room, any night. I don't even care if you give us rent. I want this to become part of my church's mission. So in 1997, me and some of my sponsees started a meeting that was a presentation meeting. Now, there's presentation meetings all over the place. That's not unorthodox now, where you get somebody who's going to go through the book, who's got experience, who has an awakened spirit, who's got experience, and they're going to share through the book their experience, and with some information that would be helpful if you didn't have that information. But that didn't exist, and it did not make me a very popular person in my area. Let me tell you, very few people from my town went to that meeting. I was that guy doing that weird stuff, who's a teacher. He's a teacher, he's a know-it-all. One guy called me a Dudley Do-Right. But I'll tell you what, people came from all over. People came from 4 different states when they heard about this because it was different. And there were people out there that were looking for a deeper experience in Alcoholics Anonymous, and they showed up in Burnsville, New Jersey, looking for that deeper experience. You can find that deeper experience all over the place now. Alcoholics Anonymous, the recovery part of Alcoholics Anonymous has gotten way better than it's ever been. The recovery part of Alcoholics Anonymous is way better than it's ever been. The fellowship has paid some of the price. I never see fellowship like I saw in the early 90s anywhere, except maybe Austin, Texas or something, where there's still like really vital fellowship. But we're not dating each other like we used to. Let me just put it that way. Anyway, so that's a little bit of my experience. Why do I want to use the chapter Working with Others as a big book workshop for the next 5 weeks? Because it's all in there. It's all in there. And it's in there in a way that directs us to share our experience with all of this stuff with another alcoholic. And with that, I'm going to start reading the chapter Working with Others, and I'll break it down in my own way. And listen, I'm not the person that knows everything about Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I have my own experience. My opinion has been manufactured through that experience. If I say something that goes against what your sponsor is telling you, just please understand your sponsor is probably right. This is my own experience. But maybe you'll find some of that experience helpful in the next several weeks. I hope you do. So anyway, chapter 7, Working with Others. Practical experience shows that nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics. This is one of the first lessons Bill Wilson learned. And here's how he learned it. He had a white light experience on his hospital detox bed. He's detoxing from his last drunk. And Ebby and the boys come in and he does some step work. He makes a decision to do some more step work on that hospital bed. He has an experience from that, right? And he makes a decision that he is going to move forward with his life, carrying this message to alcoholics. That's what he's going to do with his free time, which is a lot. He had a lot of free time. Okay, so he's going to spend it trying to carry this message, the message of this spiritual awakening, to other alcoholics. Now, he's doing this for 6 months, folks. And 6 months, he's dragging drunks off of bar stools. He's going to the Market Street. He's going to Calvary Church Mission. He's finding drunks in the alleys, anywhere he can find a drunk, right? And he's coming at them with the spiritual solution. Just coming at them with the spiritual solution. Like you need to find Jesus. It's basically what he's doing. Now he has a talk with the doctor who was his detox doctor, Dr. William D. Silkworth. And Silkworth said, Bill, it's not really working real well. You need to change up what you're doing. But before that happens, he goes up to his wife, Lois Wilson, and he said, Lois, I'm disgusted. I'm discouraged. I am trying to get drunk sober. They just don't understand. They just don't understand that there's a solution. I can't convince anybody. It's not working. And Lois says, Bill, you're sober. So he learned that the carrying of the message of recovery was vital for someone's long-term recovery. He learned that in his first 6 months. Dr. Silkworth told him, Bill, before you hit him with the solution, hit him with the problem. Hit him with what alcoholism is. hit them with what I've taught you about alcoholism, about the allergy to alcohol, about the obsession of the mind. Hit them with the hopelessness of alcoholism, and then maybe they'll be a little bit more receptive to the message. Next person he talked to was Dr. Bob, who, you know, we all know he got sober eventually. Now, so what is immunity? You know, many of us understand immunity at a different level now, because there's immune diseases, there's immunocompromised, you know, viruses and stuff that you can get. And what they are is they're things that will break down the body's ability to fight off a foreign substance, right? That's what, you know, that's what your immunity is for. So he's saying that we keep our immunity against alcohol going back in our body. Nothing will so much ensure alcohol not going back in our body than intensive work with other alcoholics. So, you know, it's an important thing to know if you don't want to die drunk, you know what I mean? It's important to know that. So it works when other activities fail. What other activities? Well, how about if you just go to meetings? That's another activity. You know, how about if you're doing primal scream therapy and that's not working? You know, there's 100 other things that, you know, I know people that land in service structures. They don't do a lot of step work. They don't go to meetings much anymore, but they're in the service structure somewhere. You know, how about if that doesn't work and you end up drinking? Okay, well, intensive work with other alcoholics will work when those other activities seem to fail. So that's also important to know. This is our 12th suggestion. Carry this message to other alcoholics. You can help when no one else can. And I think this is still true. Now, you know, I'm not saying non-alcoholics can't really be helpful with alcoholics. They can. You know, some of the people that I think have been the most instrumental in the treatment side of alcoholism have been non-alcoholic people who really cared. But there's something about sitting eye to eye with an alcoholic and sharing your personal experience and them getting them to open up and share their personal experience. What happens is there's an alliance that can form between the alcoholic and the alcoholic he's trying to help. And what it is it's, you know, this guy really knows how I feel. You know, this guy's experienced the same stuff that I don't talk about, you know, like he might really know what's going on here. And that's really an important alliance, because the person that you're working with has to be convinced, you know, has to be convinced that you're authentic. You know what I mean? That what you're sharing with them is not one more boondoggle. Because usually when people show up in Alcoholics Anonymous, they've tried 50 other things and they've all been boondoggles. You know what I mean? So what we want to do is we want to convince somebody that we know how they feel because we've been where they are, we've done what they've done, and, you know, we understand at a level that their family doesn't understand, their spouses don't understand, their therapists don't understand. We understand at a level that's different, you know, an experiential level. You can secure their confidence when others fail. You know, so the craziest thing is, you know, like somebody's trying to get sober, you know, and their wife is trying to help them, and their neighbors and their bosses are trying to help them, and the church is trying to help them, and they're in therapy, and they got a psychiatrist, and everybody's trying to help them. They go to Alcoholics Anonymous, and a plumber named Larry is the one that fixes them. You know what I mean? It's just it's just the nature of the illness. So please remember that they are ill. Now, there's stigma about alcoholism, right? There's a lot of stigma. I even have some stigma. You know, I'll be working with a newcomer and I'll get upset, or I'll get discouraged, or, you know, I'll feel inconvenienced or something. And what that is that stigma. I need to understand what alcoholism is. I need to understand what these people are up against. This is an illness, right? I need to be mad at the illness. I don't need to be mad at the ill, because they're probably doing the absolute best they can. You know what I mean? So right off the bat, he's basically telling us to chill out. Don't uh, you know don't get upset with these people, because alcoholism is a progressively fatal illness. It's cunning, baffling, and powerful. And these people are powerless over alcohol, and they haven't been exposed to a spiritual solution, and they're very ill. You know what I mean? That's just the best way to describe somebody like that. They're not, the so anyway, it says light now right off the bat, Bill is great with the promises, like the carrot. He holds a carrot out for you. And he always does that with these action steps. And he always explains what your experience is going to be when you start to do this in your life. He knows that we need to be convinced. We're selfish and self-centered at core. So if we're going to start to take some spiritual action, you need to tell us what we're going to get out of it, right? So he knows that. So he gives us a paragraph of promises. Now, all these promises have truly come true to me. It says, life will take on new meaning. Life has a whole new meaning for me today. My quality of life is extraordinary. It just is. And I spent a lot of time talking with other alcoholics. Before I got on this meeting, I was talking with somebody who's relatively new in this recovery thing, right? My life has taken on new meaning. I don't know that I'm the type of person I would have even liked when I first came into Alcoholics Anonymous, right? And the biggest lie in the world is when someone says a tiger never changes their stripes. People don't change. Let me tell you, we're in the middle of a change engine here. Alcoholics Anonymous is a change engine. You want to change for the better? We got your plan. You know what I mean? I got to tell you, because I've experienced it. To watch people recover and to see them help others, and to watch loneliness vanish, to see a fellowship grow up about you, to have a host of friends. This is an experience you must not miss. And I've had every one of those experiences. I have seen people who were dying of alcoholism, recover from alcoholism, and start to help other people recover. I've got great grand sponsees. You know what I mean? So I've seen this work. I've seen what happens when you throw the rock in the pond. I've seen where the ripples can go. And it just gives my life more quality and more purpose. To watch loneliness vanish. The saddest thing in the world is the loneliness of the alcoholic. We really think we're apart from and disconnected from everything. And to watch someone gain a connection and start to be connected again after, listen, alcoholism is an illness of isolation. You know what I mean? And it's an illness of loneliness. And how do we treat our loneliness? We treat our loneliness with more isolation. That's what alcoholics do. So to see them come back and connect and be part of a fellowship, to come back into the world and, start to be part of the social organism that we are, is great. Listen, folks, we're tribal instinctually and genetically. So I'll explain it like this. So I'm going to say mankind, Homo sapien, has been around for maybe a couple of 100,000 years. All right. So until about 3,000 years ago, when we discovered how to do agriculture, how to mass produce agriculture, what we were hunter-gatherers. That's how we survived. So we survived in tribes for hundreds of thousands of years. So it's genetically implanted in us. Now, what would one of those tribes look like? There'd be like 20 adults and maybe 30 or 40 children. And we would move around trying to find food and trying not to get killed. And it was very important to be part of that tribe. The worst thing that could happen would be to be sent out from that tribe and to be on your own. Now we've got that instinctually and genetically implanted in us. And alcoholism has been pulling us out of the tribe. So what do we got to do? What do we got to do to get back to some type of emotional and spiritual health? We got to get back with the tribe. And you know what the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous is? It's the coolest collection of wackadoos that you can ever put together in a tribe. And I love it. I love alcoholics. I love being part of this particular tribe. To see a fellowship grow up about you. So I told you I started a meeting in 97. I can't tell you how that fellowship grew. It's amazing. I moved to Colorado and I found two people living in Denver who were part of my home group. They went through my home group. They're part of my fellowship. These people are all over the place now. And these are AA members in good standing who, paid attention and did their job with the steps and moved on and went out and did what they needed to do with their life, moved around to different places. I not only did I see a fellowship grow up about me in my community, I see a fellowship that's grown up about me in this country. It's amazing. This is an experience you must not miss. It's available. You got to put some work into this. You're not going to experience this through osmosis. You're going to have to do your job, but it's available. And you want to talk about quality of life, man. Have a countrywide tribe. It is really cool. So we know you will not want to miss it. Frequent contact with newcomers and with each other will be the bright spot of your life. My contact with all of you really is the bright spot of my life. Listen, I got a job and I got a family and, I got a community and I do a lot of things, okay? One of my favorite things in the world is to get on a meeting like this and share some time with you. It's a bright spot of my life. A lot of my friends are on this Zoom. I unapologetically sent this flyer out to a ton of people, and so I've got a couple of handfuls of friends here tonight, and I thank you all for coming. Now, here's where it starts to give us instructions in what our job is to be, what the work of Alcoholics Anonymous is going to be. I happen to be a person who believes that the first 11 steps prepare us for the work. The first 11 steps are about awakening our spirit and our service ethic for us to now engage in the work of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, I want to put what we're going to read in context. This is 1939 when they wrote this. There's two meetings. One of them's about to start in Cleveland, but it hasn't yet, okay? So 2 AA meetings in the whole world, and they weren't even AA meetings, they were Oxford Group meetings while they were writing this book, but they were drunks trying to help drunks. So let's just, look at it that way. Now, what did they do? They needed more fellowship. They knew that they needed to stick together and work with other alcoholics. So they went out and they searched out alcoholics. They went to where alcoholics were to try to do the 12-step work. Now, we don't do that as much anymore. Hell, there's a lot of opportunity in the AA meetings. People come to us in the AA meetings, or people, or we carry the message into treatments or detoxes or whatever. Very few of us go around to the bars or Skid Row or anything anymore, and, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's a bad thing, but, take this in the context of 1939 as we read it, but I want to say this, that this should be our baseline. The instructions that they give us and what we're supposed to do with the alcoholic, how we're supposed to approach the alcoholic, what we're supposed to communicate to the alcoholic, how we're supposed to help the alcoholic, what type of relationship that we're supposed to have with the alcoholic that we're trying to help. It's all in this chapter, and it's all as relevant today as it was in 1939. So this really should be our baseline. And as I go through this stuff over the course of the next couple of weeks, we're going to look at the first visit. We're going to look at the second visit that we're supposed to have. We're going to look at the instructions in those visits, and then we're going to look at what life is going to be like, working with other alcoholics. Some of the things that we're going to experience working with other alcoholics, and it is a cool thing, like none of this looked like it was going to be any good before I did it. None of this looked like it was going to work in my case before I took the action. So sometimes we need to take some stuff on faith. So if there's some things in here that you've never done, take it on faith that it's going to be a good experience for you if you do it. If you do it, if you're sponsoring in a different way, if you're giving them your phone number and telling them to call you if they get in trouble, that's fine. That's better than nothing. But doing something like that is merely encouraging someone to stay sober. What this chapter is about helping someone to recover from the illness, alcoholism. That's the baseline that's in these two visits and what comes after. So the difference between encouraging somebody to stay sober and helping them recover from alcoholism could be the difference between life and death for people. You know what I mean? Because there's a lot of people who meetings ain't going to keep them sober. So many people go into AA, sit in the chair, expect to recover from alcoholism, don't, and then leave AA and drink themselves to death, convinced Alcoholics Anonymous did not work for them. When the actual truth was they never tried Alcoholics Anonymous. Trying Alcoholics Anonymous includes the 12 steps. We are a 12-step fellowship. We're not a self-help meet and greet, group. We're a 12-step fellowship. So sometimes it's incumbent upon us to offer someone an opportunity to go through the steps. It may mean the difference between life and death, depending on, how sick they are with alcoholism. So that being said, how are we going to start to work with other alcoholics? It says here, perhaps you're not acquainted with any drinkers who want to recover. You can easily find some by asking a few doctors, ministers, priests, or hospitals. Okay, so my doctor knows I'm sober, sends me one guy a month. Okay, I still do that. I tell the place I work. I haven't gotten anybody from there, but I haven't even worked there a month yet. Give it time. My neighbors know that I'm in recovery. I just got a referral tonight from a next door neighbor. So you can still do some of this stuff. It might look a little different, but you can still do some of this stuff just by, listen, you don't have to tell everybody you're in Alcoholics Anonymous if you don't want to. You can merely say, I quit drinking and I help other people quit drinking. What's so shameful about that? You know what I mean? And if you're not comfortable with that, give it a couple of years. Your comfort level might get there. You might want to remain anonymous the rest of your life, completely, except in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's really up to you. That's your decision. But if you want to, if you want to be available to help other alcoholics, sometimes these additional avenues of finding other alcoholics are worthwhile to do. I've had ministers send me people. Hell, I've sponsored some priests and ministers. Okay, hospitals. I've carried the message into hospitals for years. Treatment centers for years. I'm doing it now. I have a Wednesday night commitment every Wednesday. I'm in a recovery center carrying the message of the book Alcoholics Anonymous. It's the coolest thing ever. They will be only glad to assist you. And I've found that that's true. Don't start out as an evangelist or a reformer. Again, we don't want to talk down to an alcoholic. Would you talk down to somebody who had cancer or heart disease? Like, you pathetic cancer, victim, that's crazy, right? Alcoholism is an illness. Let's not express stigma. Somebody, listen, I was sick with alcoholism. I was dying of alcoholism. My sponsor was very kind to me. He never talked down to me. Thank God. Unfortunately, a lot of prejudice exists, and yes, it does. Don't ever expect people out there to understand alcoholism as an illness. Most of them don't think it's an illness, and most of them have never thought about it as being an illness. They see the worst of us. They see the worst of it. Doctors see the worst of us. Okay. Emergency rooms see the worst of us. We show up in an emergency room at our absolute worst. So how about going back to an emergency room when you've recovered from alcoholism and thanking them for sewing your head up or whatever, and telling them that you got into recovery and giving them your phone number. How about doing that, and trying to help some of that stigma, because so many people see us at the absolute worst, and now we're like afraid to show them, to tell them now that we're better. It doesn't make any sense to me. Anyway, you will be handicapped if you arouse any prejudice. Ministers and doctors are competent, and you can learn much from them if you wish. But it happens that because of your own drinking experience, you can be uniquely useful to other alcoholics. I've learned, listen, I'm deep into spiritual studies all the time, right? I'm deep into spiritual books all the time, and priests, ministers, and rabbis, I could recommend books till the cows come home. Deep spiritual texts, and so many of them relate to the things that we learn in 12-step recovery. These are spiritual truths that permeate all religions and all philosophical theories. They just do these sound spiritual principles. So I've been able, what all that spiritual work has done for me. It's increased my vocabulary, probably more than anything. I can talk about spiritual matters using the English language much better now, after reading 700 spiritual books. But the thing that I'm connected to, and the thing that my foundation always has to be built on, is the 12 steps and the way they're laid out in this book. That everything springs from that. So cooperate, never criticize. To be helpful is our only aim. When you discover a prospect for Alcoholics Anonymous, find out all you can about him. If he does not want to stop drinking, don't waste time trying to persuade him, okay? Unfortunately, you have to want to stop drinking for Alcoholics Anonymous's switch to flip. You just do. There's got to be a surrender. There's got to be a bottom. There's got to be some willingness. There just has to. Now, there's things in the treatment world like interventions, and there's therapeutic communities, and there's Outward Bound, and there's wilderness treatment. And if you get thrown into one of those, the behavior modification stuff might help you, But in Alcoholics Anonymous, we work with people who want to quit drinking. Those are the people that we work with. You may spoil a later opportunity if you try to convince somebody to stop drinking. Dude, if you got one more drink in you, God bless you. You know what I mean? Listen, could a Komatsu tractor have pulled you away from alcohol before your last drink? So the time for working with alcoholics is when they're done. You know what I mean? When they're done. This advice is given for his family also. They should be patient, realizing they're dealing with a sick person. If there's any indication he wants to stop, have a good talk with the person most interested in him, usually his wife. This is stuff that doesn't happen much anymore because we work with people that show up in Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. I've known people 25 years and gone to meetings with them every week and have never met their wife. That would have been unheard of in the early days of Alcoholics Anonymous. You showed up in Dr. Bob's group, and his first question would be, "Are you married?" And if you said yes, the next thing he would tell you to do is go get your wife and bring her here. This is a family illness. We want her to be part of this. This is something we don't do as much anymore. I'm not going to make any judgments about it being pathetically, I don't judge that stuff, but I think something was lost. We do have Alan on now, and I always keep Alan on Big Book Zoom meeting thing right on my phone, because every once in a while I get an opportunity to refer somebody to Alan, and I'm grateful to do that when I get a chance. Get an idea of his behavior, his problems, his background, the seriousness of his condition, and his religious leanings. You need this information to put yourself in his place to see how you would like him to approach you if the tables were turned. So prior to the first visit, you want to understand who you're dealing with. You want to know a little bit about the person. You may not get the opportunity to do that because you're meeting somebody in AA and they're coming in and they're raising their hand, they're saying they want help. I guess that's all right. But if you have the opportunity, find out what you can about the person so that when you're sharing with them your experience, you'll know how to share your experience with them without them thinking you're a lunatic. There'll be more of a connection. You'll understand them a little bit more. Are they an iron worker or are they a brain surgeon? Do they go to church every Sunday or are they an atheist? I mean, you want to know this stuff so that when you approach them, you don't antagonize them, or you don't disrespect them, or you don't shame them. You know what I mean? We're not supposed to talk down to any alcoholics in that way. Now, I've gone on about 55 minutes. I think that's about my limit. When we come back, we're going to pick the reading up on page 90, and we're going to get heavy into the first visit. So if you've enjoyed tonight at all, please come back next week, and we'll do a little bit more exploration of working with others. All right. Thank you.